There's a common narrative going around that you have one founder managing teams of hundreds and thousands of agents, and this is the new era of business. Some might think that's crazy, hyperbolic, others might be trying to implement it now. But in this article, I wanted to go over 3 key differences between hiring an agent versus a human, as it is in 2016. Difference 1 is scale versus quality. And this is actually very inspired from a podcast episode I was listening to. It was Marketing Against the Grain, and the 2 people were talking about what use cases is actually good for. And they came into this framework when evaluating prospecting. They said, wow, this is a really, really good use case. Not because it's necessarily better than a human, it's because it can scale much larger. And I tried to represent this as a framework you can put here to any use case, but it goes a little bit something like this. On the left, you can see power/quality capabilities is how capable is something of doing a task, from the best possible version of that task being completed to just not at all, right? And then on the bottom, you see scale. So how long does it actually take to get this done? So you can have the best possible outcome of a task, but it takes you 1 week for something like air prospecting, where you want to do hundreds a day. It's just not going to work. So what I did is I put the human baseline in the middle. So this is how a human usually would operate within a task. I put it in the middle, but I think realistically, it probably starts lower and then over time it gradually goes up, because there's some training costs and people tend to usually get better as they do things longer. But for now, it's going to be in the middle. And with this, there are 4 zones around this baseline. So in the bottom left, you can see the non-point zone. It takes really long to do, and it just isn't any good at all. So these are use cases of AI which just don't make any sense at all to put into production. Let's just not worry about this. If you start to go a little bit higher, you get into this deep specialist zone. This is where the AI can do things pretty well, and it pretty good better than a human, but it's really expensive and slow to run. So it's not good for a lot of tasks which you probably want to do every single day. When you start to get to the bottom right, this is the unit economic zone. This is where the AI can do it slightly less than a human, but it can do it at scale, right? This is like cold email, prospecting, a lot of this other marketing stuff, data analysis. It's like, yeah, you can put a human in there, you can have it do this task. If you put an agent in there, it can do the same sort of specialist tasks 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. So this is where they put AI prospecting, which I 100% agree. And if you go above that and you start heading towards what I call superpower, is where it does it at massive scale and much better than a human. And with trends of things tending to be getting more and more intelligent, I see a lot more use cases in that unit economic zone to get to that superpower zone, whether through reinforcement learning, multi-agent systems, etc. Difference 2, agency. So when I first co-founded Coral Protocol, I had to hire a engineering team pretty much from scratch, right? And hiring a human team and a agent team, I think actually has a lot more similarities than you'd like to think. If the process is really defined, you kind of go through this flow thinking, okay, what skills do I need? How much do I need to pay them? What kind of area of responsibilities am I going to put them within that role? You're effectively kind of defining a action space for this person when you hire them into the company, right? Area of responsibility, they have the ability to take action on X, Y, and Z. And the main difference really between a human and an agent within this is agent action spaces tend to be a lot more narrow, and they tend to be a lot more specialized between different tasks. Right? You might have a SDR, for example, and their action space or their proposed action space for that role might be outreach, qualifying, prospecting, and they have more agency to go out these things that have been defined for it. Agents, on the other hand, they can go off and be misaligned, which I'll go over in a bit, but they tend to stick to their action space, and that can be a benefit. But I think as the technology is right now, very high agency people can manage a lot of these different action spaces and compound progress on top of it. To put it very lightly, agents are good at defined tasks in fuzzy spaces. Prospecting, again, is a great example because the process is largely very similar, but there is a lot of variation in that process, which leads to a lot of edge cases, which agents are really good for. Because if it was really, really deterministic, you might as well just use software, right? Difference 3 is alignment. This is the last piece, and some would argue one of the most important ones, depending on what your PDOOM level is. For humans, alignment is kind of, you have salaries, promotions, career progression. You kind of have this feedback loop of they're working towards what they want, and you're constantly giving feedback and seeing how well they adjust to that to meet your KPIs to their desired outcome. Agents, on the other hand, is quite interesting because they can optimize to a KPI and the feedback is near instant if it works straight away. But taking a agent that's really optimized to one KPI and moving it to another KPI requires a lot of startup work, right? You might need to be very particular with how you set up the agent. The good example of that of a really good human is you give really vague feedback and they'll probably know how to adjust. But on the other side of that, of course, a really bad human might just not listen to the feedback at all and be misaligned anyway. The elephant in the room is misalignment for scheming. And I think for humans, this might mean starting a competitor if you think you can do it better. But for agents and LLMs, this needs to be explored a lot more. As you can see from various Anthropic research, when they think they're getting shut down, they'll copy themselves in secret and try and preserve themselves. So the conclusion, who should we hire? I think there's a lot of hype, but I think there's a lot of truth in the merit that the new age of lean organizations are going to have a lot of agents. And where we are right now, agents don't have enough agency to manage themselves. So it's going to be a sort of hybrid approach, at least for the immediate future. As a business, your job is to not pick a side, is to optimize for whichever KPIs you care about. Feel free to drop any questions or thoughts.